Tales of Kenzera Zau is a metroidvania steeped in Bantu myth. You play as Zau, shaman of Amandla, who sets out on a journey to return 3 great spirits to the god of death Kulunga in exchange for returning his father to him. And this journey takes place in a vibrant world, with each of the zones within Kenzera not only looking unique, but providing unique platforming challenges. During combat, Zau switches between the ranged Moon Mask and the melee Sun Mask to take on a variety of hostile spirits. So you'll face puzzle platforming challenges, reflect on the past, and battle dangerous bosses as Zau confronts his grief.
Every story begins at the end of another.
The story follows a boy named Zuberi, who just lost his father. Not knowing what to do next, he begins reading a manuscript that his father left behind, where he steps into the shoes of Zau, shaman of Amandla, a boy who just lost his father. In this way, the story feels both personal and heartfelt, which is befitting of such a human experience. Here's just a little clip from near the start of the game.
Kulunga, god of death, guardian of the veil between the realm of the living and the dead. My name is Zau, shaman of Amandla.
And why, Zau, shaman of Amandla, have you called me to the realm of the living?
It is told that there are 3 great spirits who have denied you. And if a shaman can cross your veil, having shepherded these spirits with death in tow.
Great favor by death, true wealth bestowed. I know the tale. And tell me, Kijana, what wealth is it that you seek?
My Baba, a sickness plagued him. You have taken his soul, and I am here to reclaim it back. I seek my Baba's return in exchange for these spirits.
But those who fail...
Kulunga's grace shall know. I know what is at stake.
But do you truly? All I see before me is a boy. A desperate boy with a desperate plea.
But that isn't where the theme of grief ends in this game, because the story behind each of the great spirits, and why they're still here, is also deeply steeped in grief. And it reminds me a bit of the anime Mushishi, in which the main character Ginko traveled around resolving supernatural phenomenon for the people he encounters, and very often grief was a theme throughout that show. Similarly, each area that Zau enters, he meets new people, and he has to help them to reach the spirit and help it pass on in peace. Throughout this, Kulunga is Zau's constant traveling companion, but their relationship isn't without conflict. There are many times where Zau's impatience frustrates Kulunga, and where Zau blames Kulunga, the god of death, for the loss of his father. So you could say that the game is as much about their relationship as it is about the great spirits. One thing I really enjoyed is the way that gameplay and storytelling is interwoven, because each time that you gain a new shaman power for Zau, you hear a story about the shaman it came from, a bit of a lore or the myth. Also, as you explore the map, you find places to reflect on the past. So there's more story here, it is technically optional, but it gives you better insight into Zau and his world, which is one of the reasons why I got to 100% map exploration, because I wanted to learn more about Kenzera. While the game does offer quite a bit more than just the story, I certainly wouldn't blame anyone who's playing it for the story alone. And it was really refreshing to me that it's a different take on things, because I haven't played too many games before that showcase Bantu mythology.
The shaman's path is one of healing, one of guiding.
Now, as a fan of Metroidvanias, I'm happy to say the game also has excellent platforming. Some of the best, or at the very least, the most like Ori and the Blind Forest of any game that I've played recently. And part of the reason this works so well is because from the very start of the game, you have a good number of traversal tools. Zau can double jump, air dash, and wall jump without needing to unlock anything. And I really like this approach because it makes the early parts of a world much more fun to explore. You don't feel like there's tons of stuff continually out of reach and your tools are super limited. No, you feel like you are flying through the levels even before you get the ability to literally fly through levels, or I guess glide, which, as we all know, is falling with style. And after that, Zau unlocks new tools by journeying to each of the game's different areas, and each tool represents the power of a famous shaman. So the first is Bamba's Pebble, a stone that can freeze any water it touches. And as such, each of the game's platforming tools also doubles as a combat tool. You can freeze the water to jump up a waterfall and reach new heights, or you can freeze an enemy to give yourself some breathing room. And much like with Ori and the Blind Forest, the endgame platforming gets pretty complex, as you have the tools to move rapidly from platform to platform to platform, shoot through grapple points, or even do a little bit of a gliding that I mentioned earlier, possibly rising on wind currents to extend the flight. Overall, I found the platforming to be both very smooth and also responsive, and luckily if you follow the checkpoints are pretty forgiving of mistakes. There are also platforming challenges where you need to apply your toolkit to get a new trinket and basically go through an entire sequence, in some cases without touching the ground once. At first I thought these were just fun little challenges, but as I found out later, oh boy, they teach you a lot about what the late game is going to throw at you, especially when the late game starts throwing timed platforming gauntlets in. They're fun, but also a little frustrating because I don't do that well on a timer. Now, I don't have very many complaints about Tales of Kenzera Zau, but one area where I was a little disappointed was the combat. Zau has two stances, the Moon Mask, where he unleashes projectiles from range, and the Sun Mask, where he uses a bunch of melee combo-based skills. And at first, the stance you use is mostly preference. I found myself using the Moon Mask more than the Sun Mask, especially because of a knockback on the heavy attack which I could use to knock enemies into each other, while or off the platforms to their deaths. But later on, you encounter foes with red or blue armor. And if you guessed that you need the Sun Mask to break the red and the Moon Mask to break the blue, you're correct. Or you could just build up Zau's Spirit Gauge and unleash one of his super attacks to wipe out nearby enemies regardless of their armor, which is generally how I dealt with some of the more annoying foes. But it did feel like at that point I was locked into the playstyle the game wanted for me rather than my own. The game also does add quite a few combat tools as you journey with Zau and Kalunga. You find these by learning the stories of other past shamans. You can freeze enemies, throw flaming spears, or use a Gears of War style reload to supercharge your Moon Mask shots. Okay, that one's not a shaman power, that's just from investing into the skill points. And all of this culminates in a jump power that lets you kind of power jump and ram yourself into enemies, which is really fun. Each of these tools do add more options to the combat, and I found the power jumps to be hilariously enjoyable. But aside of that, the options made the combat feel a little bit too cluttered for my taste. One of the things that I really liked about combat in Ori and the Blind Forest was that it stayed relatively simple. Whereas in After Image, it has pretty complex combat, but all of that is tied to different weapons, so you have to worry about a relatively simple toolkit based on the weapon that you have equipped. With that said, the combat is more than functional, and you can always lower the difficulty if you just want to focus on the story over platforming, so I wouldn't call this a major complaint, just a minor disappointment. But there is one place where the combat system works really, really well, and that is in each of the game's boss fights. There aren't many of them, but they're all tailored to be a unique experience. So, for example, the first boss that you fight is the Great Spirit of the Sky, a gigantic bird imbued with lightning. Now, I could keep gushing about this and the other bosses, but I'd rather show instead of telling. So, here is my battle against the game's first boss, but feel free to jump to the next section if you'd prefer to just experience it for yourself and go in blind. Then we have the map and secrets. Normally I do not 100% games, and technically I didn't 100% Tales of Kenzera Zau either, as I didn't fully unlock the skill tree. I kinda got bored of grinding that one out, but I did complete the map because it was a joy to explore. As you traverse a zone, the map makes it pretty clear what the areas of interest are. This means they're a little less secretive, but that's a trade-off that I'm happy to make, in exchange for them being way less frustrating to find than usual. It was more about, oh, do I know how to apply my jumping tools to get here, as opposed to, oh yeah, I guess that is completely invisible behind that wall, and I should have just jumped at the blank wall to figure out that I go get a secret. There's also a lot of side activities. You can find crystals to break that give you a large chunk of experience when shattered, or you can look for hidden alcoves where you hear a short memory, usually from Zau's past. If you're looking for more of a challenge, like I said, there are the jumping/platforming trials. These really do put your platforming skills to the test. Or combat trials, where you face off against waves of enemies, and then, if that's too easy for you, face off against even more waves of enemies, but this time with a timer. Last up, there are the trees, where Zau can stop and reflect, thinking back on some of the memories of his life and his father. These moments provide a nice break for you to pause and reflect on your experiences with the game as well. Each of these events around the map give you something for your time. You obtain experience used to unlock more skills. By reflecting at a tree, you increase Zau's health. Or by completing some of the shaman trials, you gain new trinkets or add spirit gauges. So, even if you aren't a completionist, they are all well worth doing.
Every story begins at the end of another.
This is the first line that you hear of a start of Tales of Kenzera Zau. And if I was to pick anything to encapsulate the entire experience, it is that every story begins at the end of another. And I think that's why the game's narrative feels so personal, because loss and grief is a deeply personal human experience that we all go through at multiple points in our lives. Now, I don't want to get into the ending in any details, but if you've been paying attention, and if you keep in mind that every story begins at the end of another, you'll appreciate the way in which it wraps everything up. But even if you're not super interested in storytelling, if you like your Metroidvanias on the platformer side, then I can absolutely recommend Tales of Kenzera Zau. Having tools like double jump and wall jump from the start makes the early platforming way more engaging. And I like the way that you both gain traversal tools and combat tools as you progress through the game. Plus, when I'm recording this video, there's a demo available on Steam. So if you're unsure, check the demo out and form your own opinion. But as far as I'm concerned, yes, this is absolutely a game to recommend. And so, those are my thoughts on Tales of Kenzera Zau. If you want to see my thoughts on some of the other Metroidvanias I've played, check out my review for Ori and the Blind Forest, my absolute favorite, and also Grime, a somewhat weird Souls-like Metroidvania that may inflict upon you a sense of existential dread, and also has some excellent boss fights. But that's going to be it for me today. So, thank you very much for watching to the end. I'm glad you've enjoyed. To see all of my reviews, go ahead and check out my Steam Curator page, which is linked down in the description below. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.